Alright guys, welcome back to another video. This is John from Lost Relic Games. So in this video we're going to look at how to destroy crates and barrels using rigid body physics. If you want to follow along with my sprite sheet, I'll link it down below in the description. And though this video is a little bit on the long side, I did so intentionally so I can get into the nitty-gritty of the process and reveal some insightful knowledge along the way. Hope you guys enjoy that. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel as I have heaps of game dev coming your way. Alright, so let's get going. So in the last few videos, we've been putting together this little scene here, which has a player controller with a camera that follows the player. And in the last video, we did this melee combat script, which lets the player throw random attacks and punch the crap out of his barrel. So in this video, I want to look at destroying this barrel in some kind of a visually interesting way. And we'll be doing a bit of Photoshop work, breaking this barrel up, and then using rigid body physics to disperse the components through the air. So let's get started with that. So if you don't currently have a scene to work with, you're welcome to go back to those past few tutorials and catch up. Otherwise, all you need is some kind of a player that can destroy something. Whether they have a punching attack or a gun that shoots, it doesn't matter. If you've got a game that needs something destroyed, this tutorial will help. So let's have a look what we've got here. We've got the barrel and a barrel sprite sheet here. And we've got a crate here too, which we'll be using just to create a bit of variety in the scene. And both these two components will be using the same approach and script. So let's open this guy up in Photoshop. And you can see here I've got two layers, one with a crate, one with a barrel. So what you'll want to do first of all is kind of give yourself a bit of room to work. In my case, my stage size here is 256 by 256. So you want to try to keep it in power of 2s, 512 by 512, 1024 by 1024, or any combination of those, 256 by 512, etc. So let's get this show on the road. So what we'll be doing here is, first of all, I'll duplicate this layer with Control J, and then using this polygonal lasso tool, I'm going to come in here, zoom in a bit, and come up with an interesting way to dissect this barrel. And one thing you might want to do is kind of follow the lines of the shape so that when it breaks up, it kind of visually makes sense. Or not. It'll happen so quickly that it doesn't really matter too much, but it can be nice when you see it break up along the lines. So we've got one section, so we'll do a Control X for cut, and then Control V to repaste it. So now we've got a new layer with this little section here. So we'll just move that a bit to the side here. So this is actually the same approach I'm using in my own game called Blood and Mead. You can see we've got sprite sheets here of broken up assets, very much like we're doing in this current tutorial. And now let me give you an idea of what this stuff looks like in action. Cool destructibles, huh? Speaking of which, Blood and Mead is currently available to wishlist on Steam. If you guys jumped over there and gave it a wishlist, I'd be so grateful. It'll help the Steam algorithm to notice the game. I'll drop the link in the description below. So thank you for your kindness, and let me return the favor with this tutorial for you. And we'll continue on with this lower section. So back to the lasso tool here, the hotkey is L for that. And we'll, holding shift, we can snap to a hard line. And maybe we'll break this down the middle. Hold on, let me just deselect that. So hopefully you guys know a little bit of Photoshop. This isn't exactly a Photoshop tutorial. That's kind of assumed knowledge, you can say. If I was to do a Photoshop class, it'll be very extensive. But that's something, if you guys want to know about, that is something that we can look at in the future. Okay, so once again, Control X to cut, Control V to paste onto a new layer. And now we have these three components. So we'll just move these away from each other a little bit so that when we take it into Unity, we can slice these things up without any issue. Okay, so let's quickly do the create here. So Control J to create a new layer. And then once again, click the lasso tool. And this can make for an interesting shape. You might cut it along the lines here. So, I mean, you can break these things up into a lot of pieces, and the more pieces you have, the more interesting it'll visually be, depending on the game you want. In this case, I might try to keep it to 3 pieces. I'll try to make it look like it's kind of breaking unnaturally, or rather along the organic lines of the wood, of the crate rather. Control X, paste it onto a new layer, grab this lower bit here. We might just move it over here so we're away from that other barrel. Maybe something... I don't really like that too much. Maybe something like that. What do you guys think? How does that look? You guys don't exactly know what I'm doing with it just yet, so that question is sort of irrelevant. Alright, so we have our pieces here. I think this is a pretty reasonable start. And we'll go to File, Export, basically just whatever method you're using to export, and find our initial sprite sheet and just overwrite that. Replace, boom. Okay, back to Unity. So now we go click back on that sprite sheet, and you can see here it's updated at the bottom. It's got the new pieces. So first of all, if you're working in pixel art, make sure this point filter is on. If you're working with vector art, feel free to have bilinear or trilinear. Having point mode will make the pixels very crisp and sharp. So anyway, continuing on, we'll hit Sprite Editor, and you can see here we've got the base, barrel, and crate. That is the one currently in the scene that's being shaken. So here we have these pieces now, right? So we want to slice them up. So I'll go to the Slice tool, and automatic is fine. Rather than delete existing, I'll say safe. That'll keep our existing two, what do you call it, slices here without deleting them. Hit slice. And now we have these sections here. When you slice things up in Unity, you always just want to go quickly back in and make sure that it's been sliced up. Okay, you can see here that there's a bit of a 1 pixel. And here you can see it hasn't sliced quite perfectly. Check this out over here. That looks okay. That one looks okay. We'll just bump that up. And we shall hit apply. Close that off and get back to our scene. So this sprite sheet for both the player character and these barrels will be available in the links in the description of this video. So if you don't have something to destroy, feel free to jump down there and grab those, open them up in Photoshop, and feel free to follow along exactly how I did it. It's a good starting point. Right, so here we're going to do it now. We're going to blow this thing up. So how this works is we're going to remove this guy from the scene, this existing barrel, and we're going to replace it with another game object, which is made up of these sections, and then use a script on each of those components to push them away. That's how I like to do it. Other people may do it differently. There might be, I imagine in Unity, if you're a Unity user, you'll know that there are a ton of ways to do things in Unity, and each has their own style. This is one I came up with myself that I quite like, and it's the way I do it. It works for me. So one trick what we'll do here, select the barrel in the scene and right click and say create empty. And this will create an empty object within the barrel. What we're going to do then is to then drag it back out of the barrel. So it's a child of the actual whole stage. Why I did that is because if I now click this new object and look at the pivot point, it's aligned perfectly with the barrel. So doing that, right-clicking and creating a child of that object and then moving the child out of the object allows us to map the same X and Y position without then fiddling with the coordinates in the top here and trying to align things perfectly. So this new game object, I'll just call it barrel destroy. So anytime I do this destruction stuff, I usually like to end the word with destroy, just so I know that it's a barrel that can be that destroys. So that's the create. We need the barrel pieces. Okay. So what we'll do now is shift and click and select all three of these pieces and drag it into this barrel destroy clip. No. Okay, so my mistake. When you group select things in Unity, it tries to make an animation. So we have to do it one at a time, guys. So click one, drag it into the barrel destroy, grab the next one, drag it into the barrel destroy, and grab the final one and drag it in also. And they've just moved themselves over here somewhere. So what we'll now do, grab these subcomponents and position them back on to the barrel, matching the shape. That way, when this thing blows up, rather than just a mishmash of things flying everywhere, it'll actually look like an egg breaking. And that's what makes this system this makes this approach very, very cool, because it'll break apart and actually look like it's, really breaking and not just a bunch of particles and crap flying everywhere. So this doesn't have to be perfect, this part. Just kind of, just eyeball it. And that looks okay. So now we want to make a prefab out of this object, because we're going to be loading it in at runtime when that original barrel gets destroyed. So to do that, grab this barrel destroy and drag it into your prefabs folder. Okay, so now we can actually remove this barrel from the scene. And so we have an existing script on this barrel. I'm thinking of removing this script and doing it again. We touched on it in the last tutorial, but there might be a few people coming here for the first time wanting to know how to break this thing up, even kind of make the initial one take damage. So I might do that, guys. So in my assets folder, I've got this barrel script. I'm going to delete it. Okay, so what we'll want to do first of all, we want this barrel to take damage from the player. So to do that, we got to do one thing first, right? And this is the same if you have a bullet or a gun or a weapon that you want to destroy the barrel with. And in this case, our player has a attack hitbox here, which gets turned on when the player attacks. I covered that in detail in the last tutorial if you want to learn how to do that. But essentially what happens here, when the hitbox gets turned on, it makes contact with the barrel here. So to do that, we select the hitbox of our player. And you can see it here. If I edit the box collider, you can see it right there. And you'll notice that it has no tag. So the first thing we'll want to do is give this a tag. And you may probably need to add a new tag to your scene if you haven't got one already. If you have an existing game where the player can shoot or punch, then you've probably already done this. So we'll click Add New Tag. Then over here, we'll click the little plus arrow. And here we'll say, I'm going to call it a weapon. We'll do uppercase. Weapon is kind of generic. You know, it can be a weapon, it can be fists, it can be something else. And now that we've created that tag, we need to assign it to this hitbox. And once again, if you have a bullet or a gun that shoots, find your bullet and call it weapon, or if you've already got a tag, you can use your own one for the next step. So now we want to go back to our barrel, click Add Component, New Script, and I want to call this barrel script, but we're going to be using a crate too. So we need a word that works for both. How about we call it crate and barrel script. You might want to find something a bit more eloquent than that, let's say, but oh no, I'm going to add that as a script. Sorry guys. So add new script, and here the name will be crate and barrel script. Create and add. And that's added it now to this barrel. So make sure first of all that you have a box collider assigned to this your object. So you can see here I've got a shape, and to do that you just go to Add Component, Box Collider 2D, and that should automatically map out the shape of your sprite. And you may want to also add a rigid body to it if you're working within a rigid body space, a physics space. This game is using the Unity physics, so it needs a rigid body for collisions because my player has a rigid body. It's a bit of a thing in Unity. If one thing has a rigid body, the other may want to also have a rigid body if they interact with each other. Doesn't always have to be the case, but I'm going to do it this time. So click the barrel and double click on the script down here. Let's open it up in Visual Studio. So we'll start by defining a few properties at the top here. We'll have a integer, int, call it health, and this will be the health of the barrel. And this will be how many hits do we want it to take before it explodes. And we'll say maybe, you know what, let's start with 1 just to make this really badass. So the moment he gives it a hit, the thing's going to just go everywhere. So health int equals 1, and we can serialize that. And this makes it available in the property inspector. So we can edit it there and fine tune it. We'll also want to now create a reference to the game object, the destructible barrel game object we want to load in. And to do that, we want to create a property of the type object. And you can start typing OB, you should get an autocomplete from Visual Studio. So note there are 2 objects. You have this small lowercase object and the uppercase. You want the uppercase one, and if you hover over it, you'll see it derives from the Unity engine. That's the one you want. Some people get this confused because there's more than one type of object. So here we'll say destroy. Okay, well, hold on. Destructible ref. So it's a reference to the destructible object. And we'll also serialize this field. And we need to now check for impact with the player. we'll do on trigger enter 2D, because the hitbox that we're going to be interacting with is a trigger. That's that one that was on the fist. In your game, it might be a not be a trigger. It might be a box collider on a hard object, let's say. So when you walk into it, it's not invisible. If that's the case, then you may need to do on collision enter 2D. So here we'll say if collision dot compare tag, and here we're going to pass in our tag weapon that we assign to our hitbox. So if the collision object colliding with the barrel has the tag of weapon, then health minus minus, so our health is decreasing, and we'll say if health is less than or equal to 0, then explode this game object. Again, these function names I'm using are kind of verbose and long, specifically for the purpose of explanation. In my own games, I'll probably write something a bit more shorter and concise, but this just helps people to understand what this function does. So we'll need to make a function based on this name. There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can hover over this thing and you'll see this drop down pop up, and you can say click generate method, and that'll, boom, look at that, it's given us a function. So I'll just delete that, show you another way. If you hover over it and hold down Control and tap the period button or full stop, you'll get the same thing here. Alternatively, you can just write it yourself. And then you have to remember exactly how you wrote it. And I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to auto-generate this function. And this is where the fun stuff starts, because we are going to be loading... what does it say? Object is ambiguous reference between... Oh, it shouldn't be. If you get this error up here, which can sometimes be the case, what you can do, you can explicitly tell it what kind of a game object, and that'll be Unity engine dot game object. So I'm saying make sure you use the game object from the type Unity game object. Sorry guys, I didn't realize there was an error coming up there, so that would just avoid anything having a problem later. Okay, so here we want to load that destructible game object into the scene. So we'll say game object destructible equals game object in brackets, and this is what's called a cast. Instantiate, and here we'll pass in that destructible ref that we defined here at the top. Okay, so when this barrel gets the health hits 0, we fire off this explode this game object, and here we load in the destructible game object, and we will say destructible dot transform dot position equals transform dot position. And what this means is map the newly loaded destructible object to the X and Y position of the previously destroyed barrel. How's that, huh? If that doesn't explain it for you, then I'm not sure what will. All right, and what we can do here now, we can actually get rid of the previous barrel because we won't need it anymore because we're doing the old switcheroo. You see, we've got this barrel, that one gets destroyed, and we're swapping it in with this one, and that one's going to go. So we'll do destroy game object, and we want to make sure that this happens at the very end. Because if it happens earlier, then this other code won't run. How does that look? Okay, so we'll jump back to Unity now, and we'll find that we'll find the barrel prefab here, or click on it however you want to do it. And you see the destructible ref is none, it's empty. So what we want to do here, we want to find the barrel destroy, which is a destructible object. Just to remind you guys, this is the object that we have all the sections for. So we want to click the one that's not broken, look at the script we created, and drag in the barrel destroy over here, and this will get assigned to the object in the script. So let's now actually see what will happen when we run it. No errors, good. Boom, 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 and you can see it did actually load in that object. So it worked. And you can see here in the scene, the barrel from before is gone, it's been destroyed, and it's loaded in this clone object, which has those 3 sections. So that's cool, but it's not going everywhere, right? So we're halfway there. We have this barrel that's getting loaded in, which is cool in its own way, but now we have to make that thing destroy. So how do we do that? So grab this barrel destroy back into the scene, right? And expand the hierarchy so we can see the different sections, 1, 2, 3. And we want to do a couple of things here. First of all, we want to create some colliders. So I might just pull these apart a little bit. Probably should have done these first, you know, it's always hard to know the order of what to do. But all roads lead to Rome in this case. So we'll click on this top one and we'll give it a box collider 2D. And you might want to just click on edit collider over here. And you can see the collider bounds. Oh, where'd it go? You want to just maybe change that. So these collider bounds is when it's going to hit the floor and bounce around, it's going to use this boundary. So it's okay to kind of pull it in a bit in some areas, and you'll know what I mean later on. For now, you know what, for now maybe I'll just give it a bunch of box colliders, and later on if we have an issue we can come back and sort it out. What do you guys think? So add a box collider to that one too. So they all have box colliders now. We also want to add rigid bodies to all of them as well. So rather than going one by one to all of them, what we can do once again is select 1, 2, 3, holding shift, and go add component, and we'll say rigid body 2D. And if I hit play, I'll show you guys what this will do. This should just kind of fall apart. Oh, we can't see it. Yeah, look at that. It's just kind of falling apart. And if I grab one of them, just move it over here and unpause the scene, you can see they fall apart. They're sliding around a bit too. It's probably not what we want. So I might just check this out. I'll select all 3 of these, and looking at the rigid body, we'll create maybe some linear drag. So we'll bring that up to, I don't know, 50. Just want to see what happens if these things keep sliding around or not. Not quite. Okay, let's change the mass to 2 of that one. This linear drag is not happening. What have we got for that one? Mass 10 linear drag, 10 angular drag. We'll try that. Once again, as I always say, with Unity, it's a matter of trial and error. You can't be expected to remember what every single tweak here is going to do and how it's going to affect the game. You have to just play with it and find something that feels right for the current context. Okay, so that was kind of okay, but I feel like it's not falling quick enough. Boom, that's better. That looks okay, but you see that poses another problem that you might realize. The moment this thing explodes, it's going to be running into us. And we are going to have to deal with that. But first, let's destroy this barrel. So we're going to map these settings we created for this one. So it was a mass of 10 and a linear drag of 5. And what you can do here, because I only applied it to this one here, you can click over here on this cog and say copy component, then select the other two, 1, 2, and go over here to their rigid body components, back to the cog and say paste component values. And this will see that it updated the values for those two things. So I didn't have to manually go in and type them in. So let's get back to it. So I just got to move these back into place because I just broke them apart so I could work on the rigid bodies a bit. I hope this is making sense to you guys. It's a bit of a finicky process, a little bit complicated, but hopefully by the end you'll have a good reference point that you can go back to. So what we might just do here, we'll leave this in the scene temporarily and fine-tune this so that we don't have to keep hitting this barrel and doing it that way. What I might just do, I bring our player over here. So the next step of this is to break these sections up. So we need to create a script. So select any one of these components. Let's grab the top one again. We'll go down here and we'll create a new script. And we'll call this one, this is what I like to call it in my games, destructible rigid body. And once you create this script, you can continue using it in other games. And I use this thing everywhere. I drop it all on different objects, destructible wagons, destructible enemies, destructible barrels, and I keep reusing it everywhere. It's a very useful script, very useful, simple utility script. So we'll double click and open that script up. So we're going to start once again by defining a few properties here at the top. First one, we'll make a vector 2. We'll call this one force direction. And once again, we'll serialize this thing, exposing it in the property inspector. And the other one we're going to do is a float. Maybe we'll make it an int. Make it an int. Some things don't have to be a float. In case you don't know, a float is a number with decimal places, and an integer is a whole number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is an integer, and 5.5, 3.25, etc. is a float. So call this one torque. You might be familiar with this word torque. Torque is the spin factor of something. So we'll serialize this field as well. And we'll create another property, rigid body 2D. And for short, I like to write RB2D. And in the start function, we'll assign the rigid body 2D to that. So RB2D equals get component, and rigid body 2D. Opening closing bracket and close it with a semicolon. So we now have reference to the rigid body. So the moment we load the destructible rigid body into the scene, the one that comprises of 3 objects, these scripts will all fire instantly in the start function. We don't have to do anything else. That'll run automatically. So here we can immediately say rigid body 2D dot add force, and here we'll pass in that force direction property we created up here. So that might give you a hint of what's going on here. When this thing hits the start function automatically, we're going to tell that rigid body to use this force, which we're going to assign in a moment. And we'll also give it a torque. So we'll say rb2d dot add torque, and it takes a float, which is interesting that I assigned it as a integer. So we can just change that. Unity likes it as a float, so we'll make it a float just for consistency. No big deal. And we'll pass in the torque that we created. And that looks good. We can actually delete this update function because we're not going to be using it in this case. So let's go back to Unity now. So we've got our force direction and our torque. And we've got 3 different objects. And the trick here is to manually set these so that they make sense visually. So we want this guy here to fly out that way. We don't want it to fly out that way. It wouldn't make any sense because when an explosion happens, it has to kind of follow the pattern of the explosion and the velocity from the center point. And this one we want to kind of fly up, and we might kind of roll it a bit to the right. And the last one will kind of shoot out that way. So let's do that now. So we'll start with the right one this time. And lo and behold, we don't have that script attached because we only attached it to the top one. So let's start with the top one. So here in the force direction, if I change the force direction to 100 and the torque, let's do something silly. And the torque to 500 and run this, I'm predicting the top will pop off like a Coke can lid under a lot of fizz. Oh, it went the other way. And I was not too impressed with that spin. So let's go higher. Let's go 300 force direction and minus 500 torque. Oh, you know what? Minus 5,000. If you're going to do it right, yeah? Oh my God. It shot out of the screen so hard that we didn't get to see it. And because it's a physics object, the rigid body span so fast that this thing just spun into oblivion. So we got to be a little bit conservative here. I was trying to just make a cool spin, but I think I'm just going a bit too crazy with the numbers. So we go 800 and 300. Let's see what happens. There we go. So let's run that again. It's kind of cool, huh? That's not too... I kind of like that. I think that'll look... If we kind of punch it and kick that and the thing just pops off like that. So I might just change the torque to a little bit less, 500. Change the force direction up to about 200. And now let's... what we can do, we can either copy the script over to the other ones, or we can click on the other ones and click add component, and what did we call it? We called it destructible rigid body. So click on that script and we'll do the right one now. Just a tip, guys, you might want to rename these. I'm still using the same slice names from the sprite sheet. As a result, I've got to keep clicking those. If you rename those like top, left, and right, might make life a little bit easier. Okay, so the right one, we want to kind of shoot off that way, depending on which way the camera's facing. So we'll say 100, and we might just give it just a little bit of torque. Not too much. So I'll say maybe just 20. And we can give it a little bit of vertical momentum, just a bit. We'll say 10. So we'll do our left one here. Force direction. And so importantly here, we're going to use a negative number for the force direction left. So we'll say minus 100. And torque. I mean, we don't even need torque for that one. We'll say 0, just to give it a bit of variation. So let's run that. Those did not run. Why did those two not run? Is it something to do with this top one? Might just turn this top one off and see what happens. So they separated, not very convincingly. So I think we need a lot more physics. And this is partly to do with our rigid body settings here, because we've got, so if I change the mass to, I don't know, 5, so they're breaking up a little bit more. I don't know, let's go 1. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what was the issue with the gravity scale before, because I remember I tried having a lower mass and it was having some issues. So I might try that with the top one as well. So I'll turn that back on. Okay, so what's happening here? Hold on. When the top one just went flying. Well, here he comes, here he comes. There he goes. Boom! Okay, so it's bouncing. Fair enough. It's bouncing because of the spin factor. It's got so much spin to it. So we'll change that to 2. And I want to change that mass back up to 2 for everything. Getting there, guys. We're getting there. So I might just change the force direction for that one to 200 and this one to minus 200. But what's happening is that because these objects are so close together, they're actually, their box colliders are touching a little bit and it's causing some friction between the two, and that's slowing them down. We're going to sort that out in a moment, but one quick way I can sort that out is by just kind of separating them so that their box colliders are not touching, and that really shouldn't make too much of a difference visually. Bang, you see? That time it worked much better. So we just want to run that again. Get a visual look. So you can see the left and right ones, they're kind of breaking in a similar way, and it looks doesn't look very correct in terms of physics. So that one's got a torque of 20, that one's got a torque of 20. Maybe because of the torque. Okay, I'll give this one, the left one, a torque of minus 20. See what happens. Okay, that looks alright. That top one's spinning like a helicopter though. It's cool, but I think I need to drop the torque down a little bit. Okay, that is reasonable. So that would work. So what we want to do, we now want to apply the changes we've made. So what we'll do, click on the prefab here. And if you don't know about prefabs, I made a very good video, which is a comprehensive guide of prefabs in Unity that explains how to do everything with prefabs, including what all this stuff means. But essentially, we've made changes to the kind of template for this, and we want to hit apply all. So that gets saved to the one in our prefabs folder here, barrel destroy. So I might just delete that temporarily from our scene. see what happens now when we punch and destroy this one here. What I think is going to happen is, because the player is interacting with those destructible pieces, that they're going to hit the player and they're going to bounce off the player, and there's going to be some issues there. Yeah, so that subcomponent didn't get to shoot out too much. So how do we resolve this? We need to put them on different layers, guys. That's the only way to do this. So if you click on your player, there's no layer assigned. It's just a default. In any game, what you want to do, you want to typically put your player on a layer called player, and your, call it action components, barrels and enemies, onto another layer. You may have multiple layers, and what this does, it gives you the ability to control what collides with what. So we can say, yes, we want the player to collide with the ground, we want the barrels to collide with the ground, but we don't want the player to walk into these broken pieces. So let's do that quickly now. So first of all, we'll go over here to the default drop down, but Unity creates a few default ones, and I've actually already created one, which I'll show you what that was. Okay, so we'll create a layer called player. Actually, you know what? We don't even need that. So create a layer called ground only. So this is a useful trick I use in my own games for things that I want to, debris and clutter that I want to fall on the ground but not interact with enemies and things like that, because it's going to muck up the game flow. So call your layer ground only. This is a layer I made previously, which happens to still be here. Okay, so go into your layer and make it ground only, and then find that barrel destroy prefab, and you can double click it in the prefabs folder here and go straight to it here. And what you want to do is click on all of these separate subcomponents and go to the layer drop down and select that ground only layer. And as the name suggests, we're going to make these components only interact with the ground. So they'll bounce off the ground, they'll land on the ground, but they won't touch the player. The parent object can still be on default, I believe. We'll see what happens. Okay, so when we're done with that, we can back out. And one more step. Go to your edit settings, go to project settings, and there'll be a physics 2D drop down here. And when you click it, you get down here this collision matrix. And what you want to do here, by default, it'll look like this. And you can see it lists all the different layers we have, including this ground only layer. So those subclips are assigned to that layer. So we want to look at this matrix and say we only want to let the ground only layer only collide with the ground. So when you hover over each of these boxes, it tells you what that tick box represents. So over here, UI, if I have that ticked, the UI can collide with the this ground object, so we don't want that, even though we haven't got any UI. If I select the ground only layer, it means that those components can collide with the other components, so the debris will bounce off itself, which is kind of cool in some cases, but in this case we want to just exclusively use the ground colliding with those ones. So ignore the other stuff for now. That stuff is not important, and do not try to change any of this stuff in here because you can make your Unity physics engine go pretty haywire. So let's now check that again. One, boom. Okay, so look, we can now walk through these components and they're not interfering with the player. So I might just bring this barrel a bit over here, and let's make a few of them. Let's copy and paste it a few times. like that. Bang. Boom, 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 boom. That's cool, that's cool, that's cool. But what do you notice? They're all being destroyed in the same way. And it looks a bit shit, to put it simply, because it's visually catching the eye and it looks very repeating. So we want to kind of make it a bit more unpredictable and random. So we'll do that now, and we'll go back into this, which is it? We want to find that script, what was called destructible rigid body. So you can do a search up here in the search box, find that script, double click it to reopen it. And we'll want to create some randomness to it. Just trying to think how best to do this. Float rand talk equals unity engine dot random dot range and we can even trying to think if we should just pass in a completely random variable here, because we do have, because if we make this completely random, then it's gonna do its own thing, right? And it's not going to follow that kind of eggshell explosion effect that I'm trying to keep here. So talk is okay. Talk we can have as a random. So we'll say minus 100 to 100. So the torque will fall anywhere between minus 100 to 100. So that might be a left flip or a right flip. And we'll pass in this random torque over here. But for the force direction, it's going to be a little bit different perhaps. So we'll say, oops, sorry, caps lock on. So we'll say rand force x equals, so what we'll do, we can leverage the existing values we've put in here, just so we don't have to hard code all the minimum and max range. So we'll say random force x equals unity engine dot random dot range, and we'll say force direction dot x minus 50. Second parameter, force direction dot x plus 50. So we're using the values we type in there. It's sort of like an average mark. So we kind of want to still have that general direction and force, but then we'll offset it by a bit of a randomness. And this may or may not be too much, but we'll see. So we'll copy and paste this line, and we'll make this one the random force y. And similarly, we'll do random force direction. Because we're always going up, what I might do, I might just leave that as random force direction dot y to random force direction plus 50. I think that'll work. And we could create a new vector 2 here and pass it in, or we can apply them straight to that. So we'll say random force, random direction dot x equals random force x, force direction dot y equals random force y. So let's take a look at that. Boom, okay. Boom, they all spun, boom. Man, I'm getting way too much spin out of those though. Just want to change that up a bit. Random torque, yeah, okay, so I'm going from that to that, and it's So how about we go no more than minus 50, no more than 15 either way. Because when it spins too much, it I don't know, doesn't look that great. Boom, 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 fly kick this one, bang. So that was pretty cool. I'm going to do that again. I quite enjoyed that. And I might put a few more of these barrels around. Yeah, whatevs. Sure you can. So that's pretty cool. I like that. The weight of the barrel is a bit off overall. I might just change that quickly. So you can just enter that prefab by double clicking on any of the barrels. What's with the mass of this, man? Let's make it... Might be this linear drag thing that we had issue with last time. Oops, sorry, let me go into the prefab. Linear drag, let's change it to 5. Okay, boom, boom. All right, very cool. So let's make this even better. There's a bit of bonus content. I want to have some particles explode from this thing because it's nice to have it breaking apart, but it doesn't look like much of an explosion. So I've taken the liberty of creating this particle effect here. See that? I might just play it again. It's a bit dramatic though. I need to just rein that back. So I'll make this prefab available for you guys if you check the links below. So I'm just going to change the start lifetime to -1 and 0.3. That's a bit better. I'm even going less than that. 0.1 and 0.2. Okay, that's better. So as mentioned, check the links below and I will make this available for you guys to use. So what we're going to do with this. So we've got that in the prefabs folder over here. So similarly with how we loaded the other one in on top of the barrel, we're going to do the same with the explosion. So we'll go back to our crate and barrel script over here. And we'll add to this destructible ref, and we'll say particle explosion ref. Once again, you can just call that particle ref or explosion ref, but I'm just writing it this way to differentiate it easily for you guys. And once again, just in the same way we loading in this one here, we'll make another line and we'll say particles, and we'll instantiate particle explosion. Oh, come on, particle explosion ref. And once again here we map the position to the center of the explosion. And what do we have to do now? Do you remember? We have to drag this into the barrel prefab. So if we find this barrel, which has the, where's the script? So we've got this script here, right? And we've got the destructible ref dragged in, and now we have to drag in the particle explosion. So once again, guys, you want to drag that in here. So I might actually just call this particle explosion to get the naming a bit more consistent. So back to that script, and we'll drag in the particle explosion here. The other way you can do that is by clicking this little knob down here, and then you can find it that way. So the other thing is I just need to save off this prefab, because I've noticed that these things have edits, but they're not saved. Okay, bang, boom, boom, boom. So this is looking pretty crazy, and there's a lot of clutter everywhere. So in your own game, if you're doing something like this, you probably want to destroy some of those pieces after. We can do that now, actually. So if we go back to our, we just jump back to Visual Studio. If we go to the destroy rigid body, and we can create a function called destroy self. And in there, we just say destroy game object. And we can just call this after a little bit. So say invoke, and pass in the name, destroy self. And we'll do this after, we can do it, even use a random period, so they kind of randomly disappear. Unity engine dot random dot range. Oops, and we'll say destroy this thing between 1 and 4 seconds. One thing to note with this random system in Unity, if you pass in integers, it will use integers to make this calculation. So this will return hard integers between 1 and 4. However, if we make these a float, 2.5 and 4f, putting an f after it, that will indicate that we want to roll a random float. So this will roll any kind of number, any decimal place between that, which is a bit better. It'll be a bit more random. So let's see what happens now. And to add to that, you may want to fade it out or something using a tweening engine or opening it. Boom, boom. Okay, look. You can see they're all... So that's a little game in itself, guys. Look at this little thing. And as always, if you want to get access to this complete project with all the assets and all the code ready to go, you can jump over to my Patreon and help support me there. And I give away not just the code to this tutorial, but every single tutorial, every single project I have currently, in the past, and into the future. So that's a nice thing, nice way you can support me and also get access to everything without lifting a finger. Which kind of defies the purpose of learning, but you know, each to their own. So this is almost a little game. If we put a time limit here, it's like destroy all the barrels in, you know, less than a minute. That's already a little game. That can be the next Flappy Birds, guys. Got some issues there. So what you can also do, these barrels, I can make them on the ground layer. That way the player can actually walk on these things. Boom, boom. I can jump on top now. Awesome. So what else can we do? How can we make this even better? What is this crap error? What can we do? So one thing that we can do, we can shake this barrel and use the health. Give it a health rating rather than just having it set to 1. So what we can do is change this health to 3. Yeah, okay, we'll make another property called, it's going to be a boolean called is shaking equals false. And we might just move this down to here. It's usually good practice to put the public stuff or serialized stuff at the top. We'll make another property, float, say shake amount. I'll say point to f. So in the update function, we'll say if is shaking, then transform dot position equals all right, hold that thought, guys. One more property we need. I need a vector2 called start pos. And in the start function, I'll say start pos equals transform dot position, so the current position, that's the start position, and is shaking transform dot position equals start position plus Unity engine dot random dot inside unit circle multiplied by shake amount. So if you've watched the last tutorial, I went into this once already, but all this does is it tells Unity to find a random position inside a circle. And that's a nice way to do it. So we're decrementing health. So if we collide with the weapon, then first thing we'll do, so if minus, okay, so if the health is less than 0, we explode and destroy this thing. Otherwise, if it's not ready to die yet, then is shaking equals true. And immediately after that, we'll say invoke, and we'll say pass in a function that we don't yet have called reset shake, and we'll call this after maybe like 0.2, so a very short amount of time. And we'll make another function down here called reset shake, and we'll say is shaking equals false. So you can run a coroutine here, you can kind of delay it some other way, but invoke is just easy for the purpose of this tutorial. So if is shaking equals true, then do that, and after a 0.2 of a second, stop the shaking. Oh, and most importantly, when the shaking finishes, return the transform dot position equals start pos. So we want to return the position back to the starting position. That way, otherwise it's going to be shaking and move across the screen. We want to kind of shake it and return it back to where it was. So back to Unity, and this should be interesting. Oh, that is not working. Of course it's not. Health equals 3. I'm going to stop serializing that. I've got a feeling that these barrels are all mapped. Yeah, I've mapped a health of 1 to all of them. That's the thing when you serialize something, you'll override whatever's in the code here. So I might just change that to take the serialization off, and that'll make it so I can't override the health from the inspector. So now it will have a health of 3. I noticed that there's some errors here though. It's not affecting the game, it's still working, but why is it pointing to that? Unassigned reference to variable particle expansion has not been assigned. You need to assign the... Of course I've assigned it. Otherwise it wouldn't be blowing up like that. It's assigned right... What the hell? So I don't know how this happened, but I've got a few of these scripts running at the same time. I'm just going to go into here and troubleshoot this. Remove. Not sure what happened there. Sometimes you get these little glitches in Unity when applying prefabs. I don't know. And that still has that. Remove. Apply all. Check the others. Okay, that should be alright now. The errors are gone. Boom. Wow. Boom. It's a big shake. Boom. So let's just scale back that shake a little bit, and we're very close, guys. It's going to be really cool. I'm really happy with how this has gone. It's been a bit of a long one, but as you guys can understand, it takes a bit of effort and nuance. So where's the shake amount we've set here? So shake amount equals 0.2. Maybe that needs to be 0.02. So yeah, back to Unity, run the scene. Bang, look at that. You see we get that little nice little shake. And one more issue, it's resetting the position. So rather than the start position being mapped there, we've got to move that down over here, guys. So when the player punches the barrel, that's where we want to set the start position. Let's run that. Yeah, that's feeling pretty nice. You can just imagine with some cool sound effects. Double kick in the air. Oh. Whoa. So this is actually quite fun, guys, I must say. This is a really fun minigame. Should stick it on itch or Steam. Make $1 million bucks. Just kidding. To finish this up, I want to bring in that crate we created in the first step, just to create a bit of diversity here in the level. So the very, very efficient, quick way to do this, so pay attention to this, guys, it's a very cool way. So we have a lot of these barrels, but we don't yet have the crate. The crate is very similar. It's going to use 3 sections. It has a box collide, the rigid body. So rather than going and making all that from scratch, what we can do, we can grab one of these barrels here and click unpack prefab completely. Okay, and now what we can do is you can notice here that the blue box is gone. So it's no longer a prefab. So what we can do, we can call this crate. And over here in the sprite renderer, we change the barrel to a crate. And we just tweak the box collider by clicking that icon there. Just put that like that. And that like that. And you can see we already have the rigid body set up. And what I'll do now, I'll drag this crate into the prefabs folder, making that a prefab. And the funny thing that will happen though now is because we are running the same script, it will it will break up into the barrel pieces. So that might be quite interesting just to see. Okay, cool, huh? So what we'll quickly do, similarly to how we just replicated that barrel destroy. So we'll drag the barrel destroy into the scene, right click, unpack prefab completely, rename this to crate destroy, and in the top right bottom left, just going to change the sprite for these. So you can see why it would have been better if I had renamed these in the sprite sheet, because now I'm going to have to flick through. Thankfully we're only dealing with a few pieces, so it's not too hard. So that looks about right. And the right piece. Okay. So we can kind of bring these closer together. Box collider on that one is a bit funky, so I'll just quickly edit that box collider a bit. All right, so create, destroy, drag that into the prefabs folder. We can delete that from our scene now, that one. And on this crate we created, on the script, we change the barrel destroy over here to crate destroy. Just apply the changes. Now we can duplicate this. A few different things in the level. So this should just visually make it a lot more interesting to look at. So let's run that and see what we've created. I'm pretty excited for this, guys. Boom, boom, bang. Bang. This is so much fun. I can't tell you how much fun this is. There's something about punching and destroying things. Double kick in the air. Oh no, kick it. Let's get up there. Bang, bang. Whoa. This is so much fun. This is all, you can just imagine this with sound effects, how absolutely awesome it would be. This is the next hit game, guys. So you made it to the end. Good for you. It was a bit of a long one, but I hope you found it enjoyable. If you have, make sure you do give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to get in on more game dev videos like this. Thanks to all my current Patreon subscribers. All you guys will be getting the full project source code and files for this tutorial, as well as all the previous project files. If anyone wants to get in on that, I'll link my Patreon down below. I appreciate all the support I can get for this small and growing channel. Thank you very much, guys. See you in the next video, and until then, keep it indie.